In a quiet corner of Hefei, China, a machine burns hotter than the core of the real sun. It's called East, the experimental advanced superconducting Tokamak, and its name might not be famous yet, but what it represents could change the fate of the world. Recently, East set a staggering world record, sustaining nuclear fusion-grade plasma at temperatures exceeding 100 million degrees Celsius for 1,066 seconds. That's nearly 18 minutes of controlled, sun-like fire inside a lab. This isn't science fiction. This is China's leap into the future of energy. Nuclear fusion has long been the dream, the holy grail of clean power. But for decades, it's existed mostly in theory or short-lived experiments. China's East reactor is beginning to shift that reality. By holding plasma stable for that long, China has moved from scientific curiosity into serious contender status, edging closer to creating a fusion power plant that could power entire cities with no carbon emissions and virtually no waste. More than a technological marvel, East represents a philosophy. It's bold, long-term, and deeply strategic. While other nations weigh risks and battle bureaucracy, China is pouring billions into experimental facilities that test the boundaries of physics. And this is just the beginning. What East has achieved is not an isolated victory. It's the spark that could ignite a revolution. A revolution not just in energy, but in global power. As the world stares down the double threat of climate change and energy insecurity, China's artificial sun may not just light homes, it could illuminate a new world order. What is nuclear fusion and why it changes everything? To understand the stakes, you first have to understand the science and the promise. Nuclear fusion isn't like the nuclear energy we know today. It's not splitting atoms to release energy, like nuclear fission. It's the opposite. Fusion merges atoms, usually hydrogen, to form helium, releasing an enormous amount of energy in the process. It's the very reaction that powers our sun and every star in the universe. What makes fusion so enticing is its potential to provide limitless, clean energy without the devastating drawbacks of fission. There's no long-term radioactive waste, no risk of catastrophic meltdown, and no carbon emissions. It's energy from the building blocks of the universe, pure, powerful, and elegant. For decades, fusion was the realm of dreamers and idealists. Scientists had the theory, but not the tools. The temperatures required are astronomical. The plasma involved behaves like a wild living thing, and containing it is one of the greatest engineering challenges in human history. But now, China is rewriting that story. The East reactor's record has taken us from if to when. The implications of harnessing fusion go far beyond energy policy. They reach into economics, geopolitics, and even military strategy. With fusion, power becomes nearly free and infinitely renewable. Energy wars disappear. Oil becomes obsolete. Nations with unstable grids leapfrog into a new era of electrification. China's mastery of this force doesn't just promise energy independence, it threatens to break the current global order. And as fusion moves from theory to application, those who lead in this field won't just power cities, they'll power the future. A new world record that shocked scientists. When the numbers first came out, many in the global science community had to double-check them. Could China's East reactor truly have sustained 100 million degree plasma for 1,066 seconds? Could they have achieved a level of stability and heat no other nation had even come close to? The answer, confirmed again and again, was yes. And in that moment, China didn't just break a record, it broke open the future. The achievement sent ripples through research labs and policy rooms alike. Up until now, nuclear fusion had largely been the domain of potential. The goal was to create a sustained fusion reaction long enough to harvest meaningful energy. Until East's breakthrough, most attempts around the world had only lasted a few seconds, a few dozen at best. But China pushed past the barrier, holding extreme plasma for nearly 18 minutes without collapse. It's hard to overstate what that means. Controlling something hotter than the sun itself, keeping it stable inside a magnetic container, is one of the most demanding feats in physics. And China is no longer just competing, they're leading. Importantly, this isn't just an experiment frozen in time. It's a necessary step toward building real-world fusion reactors, plants that could feed power into electrical grids, replacing fossil fuels and outdated nuclear reactors with something far more potent and clean. The scientific world was stunned, but China remained focused. Because to them, this is part of a long game, a methodical march toward energy dominance. And with each record shattered, the distance between today's energy crisis and tomorrow's fusion-powered reality shrinks. Billions invested, and the mission is clear. It takes more than good science to build a star on Earth. It takes money, breathtaking amounts of it, and China has shown that it's willing to spend whatever it takes. Over the past decade, the Chinese government has poured billions into fusion research, building sprawling, state-of-the-art facilities with a singular purpose: to lead the world in energy innovation. These aren't vanity projects, they're strategic investments tied directly to national security, industrial competitiveness, and geopolitical leverage. Fusion is no longer just a physics problem, it's a pillar of China's future. Massive complexes like the Laser Fusion Laboratory and the China Fusion Engineering Test Reactor, CFETR, aren't just blueprints, they're under construction. The work is relentless, coordinated, and fully supported by the highest levels of government. In China, fusion is not a fringe science, it's a flagship program. This level of commitment stands in sharp contrast to the West, where budget cuts and political debates often stall progress. While Europe's ITER project struggles with delays and US labs face fluctuating funding, China moves forward, unencumbered and undeterred. Because for China, fusion is more than power, it's prestige. It's proof that the country not only manufactures the world's goods, but also engineers the future of civilization. And in a world increasingly defined by clean energy transitions, whoever wins fusion wins the 21st century. That's why China's mission is so clear. Control the flame that powers the stars, and in doing so, light a path to unmatched global influence. The global fusion race has a new leader. There was a time when the global fusion race felt like a shared moonshot, an international scientific endeavor with collaboration at its core. But the tone has shifted. Now it feels more like a space race. Only the prize isn't the moon, but energy domination. And right now, China is pulling ahead. While the United States and Europe pour resources into ITER, a massive collaborative reactor project in France, it remains years behind schedule and weighed down by bureaucracy. China, on the other hand, has taken a parallel path. While it remains a partner in ITER, it is also independently developing its own reactors, timelines, and fusion infrastructure. It's a quiet but powerful pivot. China's progress has created a ripple of anxiety across Western energy circles. If Beijing cracks fusion first, the implications could upend not only energy markets, but also military readiness, economic policy, and technological alliances. Imagine a China that can offer ultra-cheap, clean energy to its trading partners, while the rest of the world struggles to keep up. That's not just a scientific victory, that's soft power on a planetary scale. And as the rest of the world continues to debate, delay, and downsize, China is accelerating. Their approach isn't reckless, it's calculated. Fusion isn't being treated as an experiment, it's being treated as a foregone conclusion. The question now is no longer whether fusion is possible, it's who gets there first. And if momentum is any indication, the new leader in this global race is already in the driver's seat. How this threatens U.S. energy security. The implications of China's fusion advances stretch far beyond scientific headlines. They cut deep into the heart of U.S. energy security. For over a century, energy has been a central pillar of American economic and geopolitical power. But if China succeeds in commercializing fusion first, that pillar begins to crack. Fusion energy isn't just clean, it's disruptive. It could render fossil fuels irrelevant, undercut renewable markets, and rewire the entire global energy economy. If China becomes the primary exporter of fusion-powered grids or reactors, it doesn't just gain economic leverage, It seizes control over the world's next major energy supply chain. The US would find itself in an unfamiliar position, not as the seller, but the buyer, not as the innovator, but the follower. Already traditional US energy sectors, oil, gas, even solar, are beginning to see the writing on the wall. If fusion works and China controls its deployment, global markets will shift rapidly. Energy prices could drop dramatically, fossil fuel demand could plummet, and nations dependent on US exports would start looking east instead. This isn't just about powering homes, it's about powering economies, militaries, and political influence. And the US risks losing its grip on all three. The narrative is changing fast. Fusion is no longer a scientific curiosity, it's an economic weapon. And as China edges closer to mastery, America faces a stark choice: accelerate, adapt, or accept second place in the most important energy race of the century. Fusion's promise: infinite clean power. As the race toward nuclear fusion intensifies, one truth remains constant. The end game isn't just scientific glory, it's the promise of infinite clean power. Imagine a world where electricity flows endlessly, without smoke, smog, or geopolitical strings attached. No more oil spills, no more rolling blackouts, no more wars over pipelines or shipping lanes. That's the world fusion could build, and it's exactly the world China is racing toward. Fusion energy produces no carbon emissions, emits no long-lived radioactive waste, and runs on elements like hydrogen, abundant in seawater and virtually inexhaustible. Just a few grams of fuel could power an entire city block for weeks. A single reactor, when scaled, could replace dozens of fossil fuel plants, transforming not only how we generate power, but how we live with it. The implications stretch far beyond energy bills and emissions charts. Infinite clean power would supercharge industrial growth, empower digital economies, and bring reliable electricity to remote corners of the globe. It would accelerate clean transportation, smart agriculture, and water desalination on a scale previously unimaginable. Entire developing nations could leapfrog over fossil fuels straight into an electrified future. And China knows this. That's why its commitment isn't limited to research. It's building a new economic model around fusion potential. Its universities are grooming a generation of fusion specialists. Its energy companies are exploring long-term infrastructure planning. Its government sees fusion not as a bet, but as a cornerstone of national rejuvenation. While the West still treats fusion as a moonshot, China is designing for deployment. And if it works, if fusion becomes reliable and scalable, it won't just shift energy production. It will shift civilization. The future powered by fusion isn't a dream anymore. It's a destination. And right now, China's the one laying the tracks. Why fusion is still hard, and how China is cracking it. Despite the momentum, nuclear fusion remains one of the most complex scientific challenges humanity has ever faced. Creating and containing temperatures hotter than the sun, over 100 million degrees Celsius, is no small feat. At those levels, matter enters a state called plasma, an unpredictable, highly energetic soup that must be suspended by magnetic fields or risk destroying the very machine built to contain it. For decades, scientists around the world have struggled to hold this plasma long enough to make fusion energy not only possible, but practical. Every experiment has chipped away at the puzzle, but instability, energy loss, and material degradation have always stood in the way. Yet now, China appears to be inching ahead in cracking that code. The East reactor's record wasn't luck. It was the product of advanced magnetic confinement, superconducting materials, and an AI-controlled system that makes real-time adjustments to stabilize the plasma. These innovations allow the reactor to respond faster than any human could, adapting to fluctuations and preventing the kinds of runaway reactions that have plagued fusion research for decades. And it's not just East. China is pouring resources into multiple lines of attack, from laser-based inertial fusion to hybrid approaches that combine magnetic and inertial systems. Its engineers are developing heat-resistant materials capable of withstanding conditions close to those at the core of a star. Its AI researchers are working hand in hand with physicists to simulate and predict plasma behavior with unprecedented accuracy. The results are speaking for themselves. Stability times are increasing, energy retention is improving, and each experiment brings fusion a step closer to real-world viability. Fusion is still hard, immensely so, but it's no longer a scientific impossibility. It's a frontier, and China is mapping the path forward. The barriers are falling, and if China continues at this pace, it won't just solve the problem, it will own the solution. Xi Jinping's grand vision for China's future fusion energy is not an isolated scientific venture. It's a central piece of Xi Jinping's sweeping vision for China's ascent as a global superpower. Under his leadership, science and innovation have taken center stage in China's long-term strategic goals. From quantum computing to AI to space exploration, the country is investing in the future with relentless determination, and fusion sits at the heart of this ambition. Xi's rhetoric on national rejuvenation isn't just about pride, it's about self-reliance. Energy has always been one of China's biggest vulnerabilities. Despite its advances, it still imports vast amounts of oil and natural gas. Fusion represents the opportunity to eliminate that dependency entirely and become the first truly energy-independent industrial giant of the modern age. More than that, fusion is a symbol. It represents mastery over nature, over physics, over the limits that have held humanity back. And for a leader like Xi, who seeks not just economic dominance but ideological legitimacy, fusion energy is a flag to plant, a demonstration that China leads not just in manufacturing, but in the very forces that shape civilization. This vision is being realized through carefully orchestrated policy, billions in funding, national laboratories aligned with party goals, fusion specialists elevated as national heroes, international partnerships framed as knowledge gathering, not co-development. Xi has created a system where long-term technological supremacy is not just encouraged, it's expected. And unlike in the West, where scientific progress is often beholden to political cycles and public sentiment, China's top-down approach allows for continuity, scale, and speed. That's why fusion, despite its daunting complexity, is moving faster in China than anywhere else. Xi isn't betting on fusion, he's banking on it. And in doing so, he's reshaping the global narrative of who owns the future. From science to grid, China's 2035-2050 plan, China isn't content with world records and glowing headlines. It has already set its sights on the next milestone, turning fusion science into power on the grid. According to national roadmaps, China plans to build a fully operational fusion reactor prototype by 2035, with the ambitious goal of integrating fusion into its national energy grid by 2050. That timeline is more aggressive than anything proposed by the US or Europe. But it's not just talk. China is already building the infrastructure, training the engineers, and drafting the regulatory frameworks needed to support a fusion-powered future. Research facilities are being scaled up into pilot production plants. Transmission systems are being modernized to handle the unique demands of fusion-generated electricity. And the private sector is being quietly drawn in, preparing for the commercial realities of fusion distribution. The 2035-2050 plan is more than a scientific objective. It's a national directive. It aligns with broader goals like carbon neutrality by 2060 and regional energy independence. In this context, fusion becomes not just desirable, but essential. And if China can be first to the grid, it won't just gain prestige, it will gain leverage. Energy costs could plummet. Entire regions could be powered by clean, steady, homegrown electricity. And other nations, especially those still dependent on coal or gas, might look to China not just for fuel, but for the technology to produce it. In doing so, China would become not only a provider of power, but a gatekeeper of energy sovereignty. By 2050, the landscape could be unrecognizable. Traditional fossil fuel powers may fade into irrelevance. Nations built around oil might struggle to adapt. And in the middle of it all, a fusion-powered China would stand as the architect of a new energy age. Is fusion a weapon in disguise? As with any groundbreaking technology, fusion carries a double edge. While it promises a clean and nearly infinite energy supply, It also raises serious geopolitical and military questions. Could fusion reactors, designed to mimic the power of stars, be adapted for weapons? Could the technologies developed for energy lead to new generations of highly advanced defense systems? Some analysts think so. Fusion research requires mastery of plasma dynamics, extreme magnetic fields, and high-energy lasers, all technologies with potential military crossover. The same lasers used to initiate inertial fusion could theoretically be weaponized. The materials used to contain fusion reactions could enhance nuclear deterrence capabilities. And in a world where energy dominance equates to strategic control, fusion becomes a lever, not just for prosperity, but for power projection. There's also the question of indirect influence. If China controls the majority of fusion IP, manufacturing, and reactor exports, it can impose terms, just as the West once did with oil. Entire economies could become dependent on Chinese fusion tech, and geopolitical influence would follow closely behind. In that scenario, energy itself becomes a geopolitical weapon. Xi Jinping's strategy blends economic and military thought, and it would be naive to assume fusion is only a civilian play. China has a history of it developing dual-use technologies, ostensibly civilian systems that can be rapidly adapted for military use. Fusion, with all its power and complexity, fits that mold perfectly. This doesn't mean war is inevitable, but it does mean that fusion will reshape more than energy grids. It could reshape the global balance of power. What the world must learn from China's lead. If China's fusion surge reveals anything, it's that bold ambition backed by coordinated investment gets results. In less than 2 decades, China has transformed from a scientific follower to a frontier leader, not because of chance, but because of vision. The West must take note. While Western democracies value transparency, consensus, and individual initiative, these same strengths can slow progress when unity is needed. China's centralized system, for all its flaws, has allowed it to align universities, corporations, military planners, and government agencies behind one goal. That cohesion has led to breakthroughs others can only dream about. The lesson isn't to mimic China's system, it's to match its urgency. The West must rethink its fragmented approach to innovation. It must treat fusion not as a speculative experiment, but as a national imperative. It means creating fusion task forces that cross industries. It means investing in labs, talent, and materials without delay. And it means taking energy strategy as seriously as national defense. The idea of global collaboration on fusion, once noble, now looks increasingly like a competition. The era of open science may be closing. China's success is forcing the world to wake up to a new reality. Those who hesitate will be left behind. If the world hopes to avoid a future shaped by a single fusion superpower, it must act decisively, cooperatively, and immediately, because the game has already changed. The coming global power shift. At its core, the rise of fusion isn't just about energy, it's about empire. Not in the old colonial sense, but in the modern one. Technological empires built not on territory, but on systems, supply chains, and influence. And in this emerging world, the nation that controls fusion could control the century. China sees this future clearly. Through its artificial sun, it is laying the foundation for a new kind of power, one that fuels cities, shapes economies, and shifts alliances. Fusion could be to the 21st century what oil was to the 20th, a source of dominance so fundamental that everything else aligns around it. And if the rest of the world doesn't catch up, it will simply have to fall in line. This is not alarmism. It's momentum. The numbers are clear, the timelines are set, and the leadership is determined. China is no longer asking whether it can lead. It is preparing for when it does. The US and its allies must recognize this isn't just a scientific race, it's a geopolitical one. The future will be powered by fusion. The only question is, who holds the switch?